Well, hello everybody and welcome again to Mind Science TV. Here we are with, as always, fascinating guests. We have the most interesting people who've just produced this wonderful new book in relation to the mind and the brain, hypnosis, and also neurofeedback and neurobiofeedback. We have Carol Kershaw and we have Bill, or William, if we want to be formal, Wade. And let's just say good morning. So, well, good day, because our time zones are everywhere. Hi, folks.
Hi. Hi.
Now, if you just give me a moment, Carol and Bill, and you just sort of sit there looking beautiful while I just say a word or two about you. And I'll just tell the folks who you are. Now, Carol Kershaw and Bill Wade are married and a wonderful couple doing these things. And I expect they're a bit like me with my wife, where when we're doing her stuff, I'm her name, and when we're doing my stuff, so I'm sure Bill gets this. Hello, Bill Kershaw. But Carol's it's true, isn't it? It's true. So now Carol's a licensed psychologist, private practice. Bill's a psychotherapist. These definitions of what these things are is a international confusion, but they are wonderful people at working with human beings who have need and wants and in their emotive and their affective situations. They have set up and manage and direct the Milton Erickson Foundation of Houston, which is where they're based. The wonderful things. I mean, Carol's working with marriage and family therapy. Bill's, let me see now, you're, I'm just looking down here, because you did your master's degrees in psychiatry and religion, which is really interesting. Both are supervisors of practitioners. They have been doing this for quite some time, and they have produced what I think is another wonderful resource, brain change therapy, clinical interventions for self-transformation. And as you all know, Mind Science TV isn't a promotional place. Mind Science TV is a place where you come for resources. And these people and this book are a great resource. And I want to talk a lot about the book, but I also want to talk about other things. So that's enough of the good stuff about you. Welcome to the show, and let's just start by, and you guys are going to have to figure out your own tag team over there, I guess. But I'd just like to start by saying, what drove you to write the book? And, you know, you've been working on this for a while. What's been going on? Just give us a bit of background of the creation of the book.
Sure. We began to ask ourselves questions about why a lot of different types of psychotherapy work. No one type of psychotherapy tends to outdistance the other, at least statistically or in research. And we started looking for common elements. And what we found was that whenever psychotherapy works, it makes changes in the brain. And that got us interested in pursuing this topic.
Yeah, and so, you know, Bill and I, the fortunate thing is that we can work together, and we asked each other this question. There are a lot of psychotherapies that work very well, but what if there were a common denominator among all of them that we could find based in neuroscience? And if we use that as the focus of therapy, would it make therapy more effective and perhaps the results quicker? And so we delved into the neuroscience literature for a long time and believe that we found that common denominator, which is mental state. We see mental state, for example, reflected on our EEG machines in neurofeedback.
We also see mental states reflected in fMRIs with monks who meditate, Tibetan monks. And there are actually changes that take place not only in brain functioning but brain structure. And we began to start following those pathways, if you will, of the changes that took place in the brain with meditation, with different types of psychotherapy, hypnosis, and neurofeedback.
And so again, we've had people come to us and say, we're really looking for the silver bullet for transformation. And if there is one, we think that it's this idea that if we focus on helping people change mental states, many things will fall into place, because mental state precedes everything. It precedes your perspective on life, your attitudes, beliefs, your emotions, and your patterns of behavior.
So Carol and I both have worked with athletes and performers, and athletes would come to us, or performers would come to us, who do something quite magnificent in practice. It would come time to performance, and they would freeze up. They could not perform to the level that they were able to. And we said, well, okay, they're anxious. And we would use hypnosis, neurofeedback, or whatever, and they would change brain states. They would get into what athletes call a zone. And then at whatever level they were competing, they would be able to do what they did as well as they could do that. Then we drew a kind of a conclusion that, well, anxiety is anxiety, and it doesn't matter whether you're playing an organ in a concert, pole vaulting 18 feet, or just being anxious about your job or whatever, that there was a common thread, and that was state change, and that preceded and what you thought of your performance.
Want everybody who's listening to appreciate this is just cutting edge. This is right where we're at, and it's exactly what I found too. I mean, I'm a real kindred spirit with you in going that it's the brain is the thing that's acting. We're acting on it, but it's the thing that's taking the physical activity. And I mean, one of the things, I don't know whether you've seen it, but because my interest is in this nature of brain state, underlying brain states. And there was this wonderful thing what Aronson and Steele did in 1995 called stereotype threat. And they actually found that the social environment affected brain state. They've tested African Americans and Chicanos and women, and looked at and the particular one with African Americans was taking students from Stanford and giving them a test, which they just said was an experiment. They performed equal to their general performance. They then said, oh no, this is an IQ test and it's going to be used as part of your end of year measurements. And principally they went down about 6 points because of this stereotype threat, this background threat of having to perform because African Americans have a tougher social negative attitude. And this happens with women in mathematics and so on and so forth. I love the book because I love Erickson, and you do that. You're looking after the foundation, and you actually deal with the book in 3 steps. There's 3 areas. Go any way you want. I mean, you might want to go through through the paces, but I think this is really interesting of the way in which you can intervene in brain state. I'll leave it off to you. That's enough of me. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we, as you've seen in the book, we talked about you can intervene at the unconscious or preconscious level with hypnosis, at the conscious level, obviously, and through brain technologies, which we talk about. And we tried to describe kind of some of the cutting technologies that are available, and we're seeing more and more things occur as we go along. For example, we didn't talk about this in the book, but kind of a cutting edge brain technology is something called brain music treatment, which is a technology from Russia. And we take a short EEG on 4 points in the office. They take that EEG and they run it through an app that was designed, and they take out the very best of the person's brain states represented in frequencies, run it through a sound compiler. You're interested in music, and a person gets back a CD with 2 musical files. One is the file that is the best of their relaxation states, and one is an activated state. And this has been double-blinded research on insomnia, on migraine headache, some ADD, and that sort of thing.
Depression and anxiety. And for a long time we've known that couples in marital therapy will act one way in a therapist's office. They try to take the techniques that they've learned and they go home and all of a sudden the level of arousal goes, and they can't make use of the good communication tools that they've learned in the therapist's office. So again, using this technology, brain music, meditation, and even just in our conversation, talking with them in a way that helps them change and learn to change their own brain states at will, if you will, so that they can calm themselves down and make use of their whole brain. I used to take guitar lessons, and my guitar teacher criticized me because I was playing all my chords up here at the bottom of the neck, and she says, I want you to use the whole neck. You paid for it. And so we want people to have access to their whole brain rather than a reactive state.
So what we tell people is we've got some pretty fascinating technology, but you can learn a lot about how to make these changes just with where you focus attention. And so you don't need expensive equipment. And one of the things that we ask people to do, this is not really a new idea, but we ask people, you know, if you're seeking to feel more self-confident or more courageous or whatever it is, when were you feeling that way before? And what were you doing? And you can call that up. People can change mental states like this. I mean, everybody has had this experience where you might be upset about something and suddenly the phone rings and you go over and you pick up the phone and you go, hello, and you've totally changed your mental state.
If you talk long enough, that mental state of conflict or being upset tends to go away.
Right.
And what we try to tell people, and psychotherapy has had this notion for a long time, that distraction takes you to a not real self. And what we try to tell the people we work with is, no, that's as much a part of your real self as being upset. We want you to be able to use that and access that as much, because sometimes it's useful to be upset,
right.
But not as much as people who come to see us, because they're upset more often. And because they distract themselves or they go do something different and they feel differently, we want them to be able to access that state more frequently, so it becomes more of a default state. And it's not a false self, and that's, we try to teach people a new language, a new way of thinking about their brain, so that they don't think, well, this is not my real self. We do see this with parents, too. They'll have a child has a hissy fit, 2- and 3-year-olds tend to do that, and then the child switches. Well, then they say the child is being manipulative, and we go, no, the child has learned something, reinforce that so the child learns they can get away from the hissy fit more quickly. We saw this with one of our sons and daughters-in-law. One of our 4-year-old grandsons was having a meltdown, and his mother said, do you need to go to your room and calm down? He shook his head and said, no. She said, because I don't want to see and hear this over just a broken piece of candy. Well, he switched it off. Again, the temptation parents have is, well, he was being manipulative. No, what he's doing is he's learning, oh, I can control this raging impulse, these strong feelings, much more quickly than heretofore I've ever thought. And so that's, again, part of the assumption, part of the technique that we use when we work with people.
We discovered along the way from Jaak Panksepp, who is a neuroscientist at the University of Washington, is that all mammals share, so far, they discovered 7 emotional circuits. And one of those, of course, is fear. We can easily turn on that fear circuit. But another one is curiosity. And so isn't it interesting, how do you turn off fear? You become curious about what it is you're fearful about. So you sort of take a step aside and you become your own observing witness. And that, Bill, that's exactly what happened in the example that you were talking about. So you get the child to be curious. Do I need to, continue into this upset? Do I need to go to the room and calm down, or can I calm myself down?
We discovered that play is another concept, and that dealing with anger, if we can help a person become playful about the situation, then all of a sudden there are far more possibilities in terms of behaviors that are open to that individual, regardless of a 44 or 64-year-old. So when a person is in a more positive state, the ability was locked into one particular path.
That was just so much amazing stuff there. That when in play, you're not in anger. When in curiosity, you're not in fear. They don't occupy, and I'm a great fan of Panksepp for years. But just that wonderful thing, what was it, your own objective witness, your own, which was just true. I mean, this is Lou Cozzolino tells us too that as parents, we're the prefrontal cortex, which is this mechanism of self-control, and we teach the child how to do things. And that parent, that dealing with the things of, say, to reflect. Do you want to go to your room? Do you think? What do you think? And there was actually some research just the other day showing that children that were given an opportunity to reflect on a mathematics problem were much better than those that were just given the answer, which is really interesting as well. I want to just push this a little bit further into the things as we step, ever so rapidly through the amazing work, but just on this idea of play, curiosity, so on and so forth, is the really interesting stuff that you do. So we've touched on the sort of the mechanical stuff, the neurofeedback and testing brains and things, but story and metaphor is something, and I just want to quickly preface it by saying that there's a wonderful set of CDs that you put out that actually show how to use this in therapy, but that's, people can go to your website, and I'll put the website up and they can go and see that stuff later. But talk about this, because Bill, you do amazing stuff with in the book. That metaphor and story stuff. I'm flipping it. What happens next? What happens next?
One of my first caregivers was Chinese, and we lived in Shanghai, China. So I learned to speak Chinese before I spoke English. Moved back to the United States, and part of my background is Native American, and my grandmother and some of her brothers and my father were all storytellers. I would go to bed at night listening to these fantastic tales, most of them true, about family. I don't know whether they were intentional, that they were all a kind of metaphor. There was a problem that somebody solved in some particular way. And that's one of the things that drew us to Erickson. When we saw him and heard his stories, that there was teaching involved in that. So a fascination that absorbs you in the story, like you go to a movie or you listen to a radio drama, and involved or intertwined in that story is a problem, a conflict, and then a resolution that teaches in a state of play and curiosity. So that's why we think that metaphor and stories work so well, is if I as a therapist or as a parent can engage a child or my client in a relationship where there is fascination, where there is trust, and a fascinating enough story so that I can intertwine or interweave this problem, conflict, resolution theme in there, then the person learns at an unconscious level about how to resolve. And so they begin to learn, and then they get into second order change. They learn to learn, which is they begin to do this on their own.
My stepson had ADD, and he was just, fit in, you don't fit in, just pressure. And he was a temporal go to sleep style. He wasn't a get angry and he would just pass out and fall asleep. Basically, just that word fascination. That was the remedy that I applied, and then a couple of years later, he gets a job with a company. He's a physical fellow, it's a plastering, and 3 years later, the fellow who owned it said, "I'm moving on. Would you like to buy it?" He now runs his own business, and he was written off as an ADHD.
That's neat.
Just with fascination.
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to say, in addition, Richard, you know, one of the things that we like to listen for would be the metaphors that people use in the way they describe their problems and their solutions, because sometimes those keep them from entering into a place of possibility.
Right, we've seen patients who, and you both have a family therapy background, both have a lot of respect for Murray Bowen and others who coached their clients in family of origin work. But one of the problems that can happen is a person gets the idea that he or she is the culmination of a 2 or 3 generational process. Anything about it. They learn all of these problems in the family, and then they feel at complete effect of 2 or 3 generations. Well, how do you change that? So we both talk with people who've done this so that they see themselves as at a point where they understand their brain and understand their families, that they have the capacity to change. So we want them to change their story about themselves. And so we listen to both the positive and also the problematic descriptions that they give about themselves.
So one of the ways we like often to start is to help people elicit a state of empowerment by letting them discover some of the things that they can do that maybe they didn't know they can do. For example, it's very easy in hypnosis to learn how to change your body temperature. We also have a really interesting device in our office called the Mind Lamp. I don't know if you're familiar with that. If people are interested, they could look that up on what's called a random number generator. And it runs through a variety of colors. And if you ask the client to pick a color, stand in front of the lamp and invite the color to turn that color, it will often do that. Now, and everything we do is research-based. You can go back and look at the research at Princeton University on random number generators and the interface with human consciousness, and that human consciousness can, in fact, influence the effect of what happens. So we're interested in teaching people how to discover what they can do. And you know, we think maybe the mind is unlimited so far in many aspects.
Now, we want people to feel empowered, and since, I'm not giving a plug, but The Hobbit has just come out in the movie theaters. We want people to find the capacity to be a wizard, if you will, within themselves, so that their control over themselves, their ability to affect outcomes in a positive way is much greater than, again, the culture heretofore has taught. So we keep having these movies, these films, that from Star Wars to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, there's always this theme of a wizard who teaches a young apprentice how to do things that nobody else knows how to do. But in reality, that magic, if you will, really comes from within, and interpersonally and also with nature to some degree. So the stories are being told, and we think that's part of the collective unconscious of the culture that gets fascinated with, we can do more than we thought we could.
This is so important. I mean, this goes right back. This goes back to the myths of the Greeks. I mean, Plato was talking about this 2,500 years ago. The average fellow is just a prisoner in a cave looking at the shadow dance of life, and real life is happening elsewhere. And see, my very simplistic or simple current day version of this is my book, How the Real World is Driving Us Crazy. I mean, these cultural these cultural pressures to be less. You know, don't aim so high, be less. And to some extent, the American version of you can be everything is also an enormously restrictive cultural determination, because no one can be everything. So what you do is you have the reverse of being led.
That's competitive in a way that lacks play, lacks curiosity, becomes so result-oriented that people, and I worked with a decathlete this last year, and he made All-American status. His pole vault coach and I had to not keep reminding him he doesn't need to focus on that. All he needed to do was to go and do each of those 10 events the best that he knew how to do, and the way to do that was to focus on the enjoyment of putting the shot, to throwing the discus, to long jumping, whatever he did, so that he was able to play, albeit in a very disciplined way, but until a final event, the 1,500 meters, he really didn't need to know how many points he needed. The last event, yeah, he could then decide, okay, I need to run fast, I need to run slow. But as long as he was focused in a way that allowed him to enjoy, participate, rather than become anxious. And that's sometimes what the hyper competition does, is get people focused away from the process of what they're doing and themselves in terms of the outcome.
Yeah, and I think this plays out in so many aspects of then what I call, we get into a mindset of having to win, of having to lose, of fearing loss, and so on and so forth, which is exactly what you deal with. I just want to jump back to the book for a second, because from the practitioner's point of view, what is really beautiful, I mean, I find that the book's sort of in three areas. We talk Ericksonian and hypnosis. We talk the technicalities of neurofeedback and neurobiofeedback. Then you combine them and you show how they're integrative, that there's no, you don't sit there and do one thing or the other, just join everything, as Erickson said, utilize everything. And then you go on and give some actual prospects for the future and thriving and all those lovely things. But coming back to that first part, for the therapist, which I think is really useful in here, is you actually go step by step through a lot of those little verbal techniques that Erickson taught so well and have been developed by all other people, including your good selves. So at this point, maybe if we just focus for a second on this nature of Erickson type of hypnosis, which isn't sort of watch the watch and you can be a chicken, you know, all this sort of silly stuff that people get worried about. It's really about this lovely interactive process between the client and the therapist to create these states. And I'd love you to talk about that for a second or two.
One of the things we suggest to therapists is when you're trying to help your client, you want to begin yourself entering into what we would call the target state you would like your client to be in. And so if I'm in that mental state, possibility or empowerment, for example, myself, the way I phrase things, particularly if I speak indirectly from an Ericksonian viewpoint, I'm going to begin to help nudge the client into that state of empowerment. And we know already that people tend to entrain to the most dominant frequency that they're exposed to, or the dominant mental state. So you have such power and influence as a clinician if you really do whatever your model of therapy is with this idea in mind.
The thing that Erickson did so beautifully was he was able to pace his clients or his patients, so that we look at attachment theory and we want to develop a therapeutic relationship. But that requires that what we do is enter in with a degree of respect, and what that means is also a degree of pacing, so that we don't go too slow, so that what we do is we try to connect with the person where they are, and Erickson would talk at the interface or at the doorway of their reality, and then take a step in and then help them just gently begin to change that reality. So as we connect, as Carol said, developing a state of connection with possibility, we also want to do that in a way that mirrors how quickly or how slowly they need to go, just like a physical therapist is only going to stretch your arm or your leg as much as you can tolerate and the body can tolerate. So the notion of pacing and leading is also part of this process of connecting with the client.
Yes, I love that. I love that thing you just said there. I just wrote it down without looking, so it looks a bit silly. But connection with possibility.
Right.
It's so lovely. And again, we're into play. We're into curiosity. I mean, I'm right in here. I'm actually going to pursue a thing. I'm going to call it the curiosity-oriented approach. So I'm going to try and lift this up, just like you guys are doing. Lift it right up into the people's faces. Stop trying to be clever and start being amazed and fascinated. Right. Well, which of course emerges from Ernest Rossi's work, and I know I'm work hand in glove with Ernie now. So this process begins. So now we've talked about how story can create this interaction, and you listen for their story, you give your stories, you begin to create this flow. You've got an Ericksonian hypnosis aspect of going in, and there are many listeners who know what that is, but those who don't, the Milton Erickson Foundation, and I'll put a website on that for them to go and have a look at. But then you have gone in, and we've talked briefly about this thing of then actually consciously working on stuff. So those sort of things, really working on a reflective and sub-reflective area. But this conscious things of utilizing these tools of feedback where, I mean, you've got the EEG things you've talked about, but then there's also working with the synchronicity, working with lighting. But there, in the book, you actually name half a dozen particular things that you can access if you're particularly interested in neurofeedback. Maybe if you would talk about one or two of those mechanisms that you use and how that helps, and this wonderful word, to help them consciously entrain their system into the process. If you could speak to that, I'd really love to hear.
Yes, one of the little devices that we really like to use is what's called an audio-visual entrainment device from a company in Canada called Mind Alive. And as a matter of fact, I love mine. I take mine to my dentist because I have dental anxiety. And you can set the device on an alpha frequency and get very anxious in the dental chair. My blood pressure goes sky high. Less than a minute, I put on this device and my blood pressure comes way, way down. And my dentist has been so amazed at it. She has purchased one of these for her patients. So you know, if you're in a situation where you have difficulty changing your mental state because you feel under threat, then there's this little device that can really help quite a bit. So that's pretty interesting. You know, another little thing we like to do is to teach people with a very simple biofeedback device that measures temperature, how to change your temperature. So we know when people are afraid, the body tends to cool blood in the center of the body and we get cold in our extremities. And so if you can get your blood to flow back to the extremities, you can develop a relaxation and change your mental state. We like, you know, no good solution to a problem ever comes out of an anxious state. So if you can calm your mind before you start thinking of developing a solution, you're much more likely to come up with something that works.
We also, if somebody is open to it, will teach meditation. Now, in our culture, that's difficult to do because people are very, very busy, and taking 5 or 10 minutes, let alone half hour out of their time of the day is difficult. But some people have done that. And so there's just a wealth of research that has come out on how just simple mindfulness practice, just focusing on the breath, going in and out, and learning to watch your thoughts and let go of them, again, makes changes in brain function and also changes in brain structure. The original research that was done at the University of Wisconsin Medical School in Madison by Richard Davidson that included Tibetan monks found that meditators, that the amygdala actually shrank in size. And when the amygdala shrinks or is less active, then we tend to be, so whenever we can, we will teach people to meditate. I used to teach and lead meditation at a Buddhist temple for a number of years. So we found that personally that has been helpful to me. It's also been helpful to a lot of people. And there's now, with the fMRI, of research that says, okay, this is what's happening inside the brain.
And I think this, I mean, what we're building this lovely picture up here, and I know with some of the other practitioners I've had the good fortune to talk to, is this very thing of we've got this, and we use that with that person. We've also got this. Oh, that's not working so well. Oh, we've got this. Maybe they're a technological person, so they want a machine. Maybe they're not, so we do mindfulness. I know myself, intuitively, I got into mindfulness meditation through my music, and I would sit down at the piano when I was distressed and upset, and I changed my state by just playing, just improvising. And well, I ended up recording quite a few of them. I don't know, I'll do with them one day, but we called them our lullabies, because what emerged out of my fingers was calming, relaxing, peaceful, interesting music, and so on and so forth. So it's not, I want to sort of chime in with you there that meditation, it appears like this really difficult thing, but there's many, many ways that you can achieve that state without sort of sitting up on a hilltop with your legs crossed, you know, in the cold.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and that, I think, what I've done is I've kind of preempted the question I was going to ask, is, you know, how do we integrate all this stuff? And is that really what the integration is? It's this utilization process with the clients. Am I talking about what you guys are doing?
Yes, because all techniques are brain researched, and it really matters less to us to use. Again, we always begin with the notion that connecting with the client and speaking the client's language and using their value system and their speed is key to whatever technology that we use. But after that, we really care less about which direction we go because they've all been researched quite well. And we want to provide people pathways that will lead them to the same end result, which is a sense of greater emotional, cognitive, behavioral flexibility, greater sense of optimism and possibility, whether it's trying to fix that or post-marriage or dealing with unemployment or just issues of life, that these things allow us to reach that same goal in just a number of different ways.
And it's beautifully, yeah, that's beautifully put. It's I was fortunate to present at Ericsson conference, you know, in December, and the word that I'm putting to this is a thing, just very simply, the interplay, which is used quite a lot. Jack Pansep uses it quite a lot. Steve Porges, you know, now sort of uses it a bit, and the therapist, I guess, kind of when they're educated, they're kind of sold a particular technique. But it's just that technique, and learn the technique. It's just like piano playing, you know, you learn the scales.
Yeah. That's right.
But, as Chick Corea, the great jazz pianist, said, learn the scales and learn the techniques and play Beethoven, then forget it and just play. So therapy is just this wide open field of joy for us.
It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. You know, I always think it's such a privilege for me to participate in a person's process. And in addition, you know, Bill and I really believe that people can move into states of what we call thriving rather than just figure out one solution to a problem and get on with things, that you really can live more often than you are now in maybe what we call an optimal mind state. You can, and that takes some practice. It's not something you can do without some mental training, we think.
It's a bit of a minefield out there. And they come into our offices, they feel safer, but as you were saying, sometimes they go home and they don't understand why they can't manage. And that's this win-or-loser world, this external pressures, these anxiety pressures that are put on. And yeah, so it's wonderful to give them tools and to give them and encourage them to not believe that the world is true, that actually they are true. And I think that's what you've been saying very clearly. Now, we're sort of tickling on in time. We've been talking for nearly 45 minutes here, which is goodness gracious. I wonder if now it might be time to take just spend a little bit on summing up to some extent, but also I'm interested in what your visions are. I mean, you started to talk about thriving. I wonder if you could both speak about just what are the playful imaginings that you're carrying at the moment. I know you've just finished this project, so you've got a lot of process to do there. But is there something that's running around your head that's fun?
The things that we do for fun. Well, one of our favorite things to do is we always have a Friday night date, and we often go to the movies. And we love action adventure. We had this lovely experience last August where we were invited to go to Esalen. I don't know if you are familiar with that in California. But what a lovely place that was. And to tell you, we went to this restaurant that's built into a mountain, and Bill ordered some French fries, and they have these beautiful blue birds. And this guy, this bluebird, dive-bombed Bill's French fry and, stole it and flew around. And then he came back and he eyed the people next to us, had left some banana cream pie, and he landed on the table and he put his head into the cream pie and just had a wonderful time. So we love these little adventures that we have. We love to get out in nature, and we have 5 grandchildren, and we love being grandparents, so that's a wonderful place for us.
Fascinating choir. It's toured most of the cathedrals in England, and they just make beautiful music. And I like to play the guitar. My music is not the kind of music that she sings. Give me old-time rock and roll and blues, rockabilly, boogie, blues, and I'm in heaven. So we do that for play, as well as we try to stay physically active as well.
But I can hear Erickson in the background here saying, now, Carol, what I want you to do and Bill, is I want you to go and get a bluebird to steal your chip, to steal your French fry. And then he would send you out. And Carol, I want you to sing in a cathedral. And then you go out and do it. So, so you walk the talk, and you play the play, and my wife and I were saying exactly the same thing. We're just about to take a little break. This is like about our 9th day of work today, and at the end of it, she said, "And then we will do stuff." Okay, I said, we will.
That's great. Yeah.
And I think we've done some wonderful stuff here.
I
just want to thank you
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure for us.
And so just a quick word back to our lovely listeners and viewers. This is, as we've been talking about this particular book, which has just come out now, but there's a wealth of depth and excitement to these people. You know, go to their websites and have a little look as a resource. Utilize, take from it what benefits you and what enhances you, because that's what we've been talking about. There's been, if you go back and have a listen to this tape, I think you'll hear dozens of techniques that you can apply straight away. Maybe we haven't done it really formally, but I think you guys have just given, I don't know, I can think of about 20 fabulous pointers, and there's 2 or 3 there that are new to me, so I'm grabbing them and going with them.
Wonderful.
So what's for the rest of the day for you now?
Well, we're going to go to the movie this afternoon. This is our Friday afternoon night date, so we're going to have a good time, and we're just starting our Christmas vacation, and so we'll be off for a few days, and we're looking forward to that.
And one son and daughter-in-law and children will be coming to our house Christmas morning.
Right.
And we've got one daughter who lives in London, and we'll talk with her on Sunday.
Right.
And got a son who lives in Colorado and his wife. And they got 2. And we were just up there over Thanksgiving.
Right.
So, and Tiffany, who lives in London, was over here in October. So we try to see them as much as possible. So we're leading up to a time for us that family play. And again, we just love watching children and animals interact. And so for us, this is the beginning of time of kind of unstructured play for us.
Well, Carol and Bill, I can't imagine of spending time with more pleasant people than you guys. So we'll say goodbye. I'll turn the recording off for now. Just hang around for a second. We'll